Middle-aged old man. Is a well-known wealthy businessman who mingles in American upper society. Lao Biu has a happy family, successful career, and he is passionate about charity. He is a typical successful person in the eyes of others. However, what is not known is that in Lao Biu's spiritual world, there is one hidden, the evil personality known as Marshall. Marshall loved to kill, especially obsessed with perfect crimes. Under his instigation, Old Bull committed many murders, and gradually began to regard murder as an art. He is often seen on busy streets, carefully select strangers as targets for hunting. Then follow up and observe. Look for opportunities to sneak into the target's home, shoot him to death. Before each crime, Old Bull would install a silencer on his pistol and wrap it in a sealed plastic bag. This is to prevent shell casings and gun smoke from remaining at the scene. After killing people, he would also dig bullets out of his victims' bodies. At last, clean every corner of the site carefully. Avoid leaving any evidence that is unfavorable to you, with a cautious and careful style of doing things. Although Lao Biu killed many people, but there has never been a mistake. Still at large. In addition, because every time a crime is committed, Old Biu will not only take the victim's body, stance your favorite, take photos as a souvenir, and they would deliberately place themselves in a conspicuous location at the crime scene, leaving behind the victim's bloody thumbprint. Therefore, the police arrested the serial murderer, Old Biu, named Fingerprint Killer. Although in each crime process, Old Biu will feel incomparable excitement and pleasure. But afterwards, he would fall into deep guilt and anxiety. He always tried to restrain his desire to kill, but the evil personality inside Marshall, but again and again he was encouraged to continue killing people. Over the years, Old Biu is in this kind of tangled pain, completed hunting of strangers one after another. Recently he has set his sights on a middle-aged couple. This evening, old cloth under the cover of night. Pick the door lock expertly. Sneak into the couple's house. The two people who were having sex on the bed were shot dead cleanly after killing people when Lao Biu was about to clean up the scene. Suddenly I saw this couple making love. The curtains were not drawn. This bedroom is opposite the window. It just happened to be an apartment building. Fortunately, it was late at night. The residents of the apartment building opposite have all gone to sleep. There should be no one who witnessed his murder. So Lao Biu calmly closed the curtains. Just like usual, they began to pose for photos and take fingerprints of the corpse, and cleaning up the scene, etc. Wait until you are satisfied with all this. He then quietly left the crime scene. Early the next morning, after receiving the report, the police and investigation into the case was immediately launched. Responsible for investigating this case, IT was a female police officer named Nancy. Nancy in recent years have been tracking down the whereabouts of the fingerprint killer. I know the Old Biu's modus operandi very well. So he just arrived at the scene, immediately identified this is another murder committed by the fingerprint killer. But Nancy was still not there this time. Find any valuable clues. But he soon noticed the apartment building opposite the crime scene. In order to find possible witnesses, Nancy began going door to door, conduct a survey of residents in apartment buildings. At the same time, on the other side, Lao Biu is working in the company. Suddenly, an uninvited guest arrived. This man's name is Bafu. He is a male photographer. Baf brought a set of photos to Old Bull. This set of photos. It was clearly recorded the whole process of Lao Biu committing the crime last night. It turns out that Bafu rented in the apartment building across from the crime scene. He discovered it a while ago. The middle-aged couple shot by Old Bull often have sex at night without drawing the curtains. This greatly satisfied Bafu's morbid voyeurism. He would stay by his window almost every night, intent on secretly filming the couple's lovemaking process. As a result, I accidentally captured the murder of Old Bull last night. Because Lao Biu is a well-known wealthy businessman, it often appears in newspapers and magazines. So Bafu quickly recognized his identity and come to your door easily. And that's not all. Bafo also used the Old Bull's skilled modus operandi to investigate the crime. Infer. He is a serial killer who has committed multiple murders, fingerprint killer. But this time Bafar came to visit. It's not to extort money from the rich Old Bull. Instead, they used the photo as a threat. Let Old Biu take me with him next time he commits a crime. Because he also wanted to experience the thrill of killing himself. It seems this guy is just like Old Biu. He's a complete psychopath. After killing someone last night, Lao Biu originally planned to stop there. End this life of killing. Unexpectedly, an eyewitness appeared along the way. Forced to do so, he had no choice but to accept Bafu's threat. Promised to go out to the street with him tomorrow night, looking for new hunting targets. After sending Bafo away, Old Biu saw his daughter Jane again. Suddenly he came to the company to look for me. Jane Ning is currently studying at a university in another city. Today is neither a weekend nor a holiday. Old Biu was curious about why his daughter came to his company for no apparent reason. Jane explained, I can't learn any practical knowledge in school. So she has already gone through the procedures of dropping out of school. I plan to help my father run our own company. Old Biu obviously didn't believe his daughter's words. After the father and daughter returned home, Jane Ning finally responded under her mother's questioning. He told the truth about his dropping out of school. Turned out to be, she had to leave school because of an unexpected pregnancy. As for who the father of the child is, Jane Ning said she didn't want to reveal it. Old Bu and his wife saw that things had come to this. I didn't ask my daughter too many questions, nor did I blame her. Asked patiently, how is she going to deal with the baby in her belly? Jane Ning said after hesitating for a moment, I want to give birth to this child. Old Bu and his wife expressed their understanding for their daughter. Anyway, there is plenty of money at home. Raising a child is easy. That evening Marshall, the evil personality of Old Bu, quietly reminded Old Bu. Jane's eyes were evasive when she spoke. There still seems to be some unspeakable secret hidden in my heart. But at this time, Old Bowie don't have the energy to guess what my daughter is thinking. The top priority, he must first solve the big problem of Buff. The next night, Bafu found Old Boole as promised. Prepare to go with him to find the target. When we first met, Buff handed Old Boole a business card. The owner of this business card. It was policewoman Nancy, who was on the hunt for the fingerprint killer. When Baff came to the appointment, I just happened to run into Nancy, who was checking for witnesses. Even though Bafu lied. On the night of the incident, he was sleeping at home. Didn't see anything. But Nancy still left him a business card. Give him some clues. Feel free to call and let yourself know. At this time, Buff handed Nance's business card to Old Boole. Naturally, it was to remind him to be on guard against this female police officer. After collecting the business card, Old Boole drove with Bayfo to a neighborhood. To enhance Baff's sense of participation, Old Bu specifically let him choose his own hunting targets. But Bayfo has more than just voyeurism and a desire to kill, and I also suffer from a fear of making choices. I saw this guy picking out a lot of things on the street. I also couldn't choose a suitable target. At this time, a truck suddenly cut in. Pulled Lao Bu's vehicle to the side. Bayfo decided immediately the truck driver was the target of this hunt. Old Bu did not raise any objection. He let Bafu use the camera first, take a picture of the truck driver's face and license plate number, so that you can go back online and retrieve the person's personal information. Then look for an opportunity to kill the opponent. After returning home, first, Old Bu found out the identity of the truck driver. Then they hacked into the local police's internal system. Viewed the profile of policewoman Nancy. Turn out, Nancy has solved many difficult criminal cases. He personally killed several highly intelligent murderers, bring them to justice. This is obviously an extremely tough opponent. But what surprised Old Bu the most was Nancy was born into a wealthy family. My father is a well-known local tycoon. Nancy herself also has tens of millions of assets under her name. A rich girl like her, under normal circumstances, or live a dissolute life. A chaotic life of extravagance. Or helping their parents run their business. Create a strong female character, and this Nancy. Why don't you live on your parents' resources? But despite the hard work and danger, became a criminal detective. Old Bu to this woman. An inexplicable feeling of admiration arises. Who knows the next day? Nancy, who made Old Boole admire her. There were troubles and dangers one after another. Turn out to be, Nancy is divorcing her scumbag husband. The name of the man is just like his character. He is a scumbag who lives on free food. He usually spends Nancy's money, but he keeps other women outside. Nancy learned about her husband's true nature, decided to divorce her. The scumbag agreed to divorce, but once to Nancy seeking $5 million in compensation for loss of youth. Nancy didn't want to pay the money. I want to get rid of the scumbag as soon as possible. Finally, I had to go to a lawyer to discuss countermeasures. Unexpectedly, the lawyer was helpless against this scoundrel. I just said I was willing to try to negotiate with the scumbag. See if you can get them to lower the fee. After saying goodbye to the lawyer, Nancy was on her way back to the police station alone. Suddenly, a burly man with white hair came over and a blonde. They were forcibly taken into a van. The white-haired man is a drug dealer who escaped from prison. The blonde is his girlfriend. It was Nancy who arrested the white-haired man and put him in jail 2 years ago. Therefore, the white-haired man has a very bad temper. The first thing to do after jailbreaking, he kidnapped Nancy with the help of his girlfriend. Take revenge on him. Fortunately, Nancy reacted. After a fight, he quickly escaped from the two men. That evening, on the other side, Old Bu and Bayfo, while driving to track and kill the target truck driver, saw it by accident. A drug dealer, a white-haired man, walked into an apartment building. Old cloth before. When viewing the profile of Officer Nancy, I've seen this person's photo, also understand the other party's identity and current situation. According to the information, it was calculated based on the time when the white-haired man was captured. This guy should still be serving his sentence in prison. But why did he regain his freedom so quickly? Old Bu realized it immediately. The white-haired man may have escaped from prison while he was checking Nancy's profile. I also know that Nancy is divorcing her husband, the scumbag. Then Old Bu immediately came up with a brilliant idea. He intends let go of the truck driver that he and Bayfo had targeted earlier. Instead, Nancy's husband, the scumbag brother. As a new hunting target. Next to Baff, although he changed his mind about Lao Bu temporarily, feeling confused and dissatisfied, but I didn't dare to say anything more. The next day is the weekend. Lao Bu is resting at home. 2 policemen suddenly visited the door. But the 2 of them were not here to look for Old Bu. Instead, he came to find Old Bull's daughter, Jane Ning. It is said that Jane Ning's studded a murder occurred in the school. The deceased was a male classmate of Jane Ning's class before the incident. Witnesses saw Jane Ning arguing with the deceased. Plus, Jen Ning dropped out of school without reason after the incident, so the police became suspicious of her. Came here specially to find out the situation. Despite being questioned by 2 police officers, Jane Ning answered fluently, "Disassociate yourself from the case." But Old Boole relied on his murderer's instinct. He determined that his daughter was the murderer. And the deceased is most likely the father of Jane Ning's unborn child. But now is not the time to find out the truth. Besides, Lao Bu is convinced his confidentiality work was done perfectly. In other words, neither his wife nor his daughter could possibly know he is a notorious murderer. In this case, Jane Ning kills people easily. Obviously, it wasn't influenced by his father. The only reasonable explanation is she inherited her father's murderous gene. This made Lao Bu feel uneasy. In order to exonerate her daughter, after sending the 2 policemen away, he immediately left home on the pretext of a temporary business trip. Then dress up in disguise, I rushed to the school where Jen Ning was studying overnight, and according to the murderer's modus operandi described by the 2 policemen, randomly killed a lone college student. 2 similar murders occurred on campus. The local police quickly classified it as a serial murder case. When the second case occurred, Jane is at home, there is simply no time to commit the crime. Therefore, the police temporarily ruled out her as a suspect. After helping my daughter solve her troubles, Lao Bu chose another dark and windy night with Baff sneaking into Nance's husband's house. The scumbag was not at home at this time. The 2 found a secret place to hide. Not long after, the scumbag took a woman back home, you can tell from their conversation. The woman is the divorce attorney and mistress of the scumbag. And Nancy wanted to get rid of the scumbag as soon as possible. He has been promised a $2 million breakup fee. The scumbag and his mistress are toasting to celebrate this. Old Bu felt very disgusted with the behavior of these 2 people, so he urged Bafu beside him to act quickly. Shoot this couple to death as soon as possible. Who knew that he had been yelling before? Bafo wants to experience the pleasure of killing for himself. Not only did he not dare to take action at this time, and I was so scared that I peed my pants. Old Bu saw this situation. I had no choice but to personally deal with the scumbag and his mistress. After killing people, he was the same as usual, went through a ritualistic process. But this time, Lao Bu did not clean up the scene carefully. Instead, he deliberately dumped the urine the Bafu had just urinated on the ground, stayed in the house. The purpose is of course to mislead the police, lead the identity of the fingerprint killer to Bafo. In this way, after Lao Bu retired from the business, you can completely escape the police pursuit. Who knew that on the way back by car, Baff sitting in the passenger seat. Suddenly he snatched the pistol from Old Bull's waist, intends to kill Old Bu. It turned out that Bafu was afraid of the cowardly look he had just shown, feeling resentful. To prove that he dared to kill. At the same time, in order to avoid exposure of his own crimes, he decided to practice with the old cloth. Unexpectedly, Old Bull seemed unusually calm when facing the gun. He told Buff I had already planned to commit suicide. Because only death can put an end to his killing spree. To this end, Lao Bu chose a feng shui treasure land for himself. Asa cemetery, and a grave had been dug there to bury the bodies. He hoped that Bafo would take him to the cemetery before taking action. If Bafu was unwilling to satisfy even this small wish, he would immediately step on the accelerator, find an oncoming vehicle and hit it. Even if Bafo fired in time, I'm afraid my own life will be in danger. Bafu saw that Old Bull's car was indeed going faster and faster. I decided to wait until I got to the cemetery before taking action. The 2 soon came to a wilderness. There is indeed a deep pit dug in advance. Old Bu walked to the edge of the pit safely, urged Baff to act quickly. Unexpectedly, Bafo discovered that the pistol malfunctioned when he fired. The bullets simply cannot be fired. He hasn't figured out what's going on yet. Old Bu had already picked up a shovel beside the pit. Strike quickly. Cut his throat. It turns out that Old Bu is a cautious person. I had expected Bafo to do this, so I tampered with the gun in advance. After killing Baff, Old Bu pushed the body into a deep pit and buried it. Then he contacted a moving company under a false identity. The people in the rented apartment of Bafu were cleared out overnight, all personal belongings. The next morning, Nancy continued to live in the apartment building she rented in Buffalo when checking witnesses. A female resident provided her with an important clue. According to the female resident, she often works overtime and comes home late. Hence the accidental discovery. The middle-aged couple who lived across the street were murdered. Always leave the curtains open when making love late at night. And before who lives in this apartment building. Not only did they secretly take intimate photos of the couple, and also to some single men and women in the apartment building, these nude photos were sold. Nancy heard this. It was immediately clear that there was a problem with Bafu. So we came to Bafo's residence again. I want to question him further. Turn out, the house of Bafu has been emptied. There was also an order from a moving company lying on the ground. The order form contained the name and address of Bafau. Nancy was just about to go look for this address, but he was stopped by a male colleague who came rushing over. From a male colleague, Nancy learned her husband is a jerk and his mistress he was murdered at home. Although judging from the traces at the scene, this case looks like the work of a fingerprint killer. But Nancy is currently divorcing her boyfriend. The couple also had huge disagreements on the terms of their divorce. The police department leaders were suspicious. Knowing the fingerprint killer well, Nancy imitated his modus operandi. She deliberately murdered her husband and his mistress. A male colleague came this time. It is to notify Nancy to return to the police station to cooperate with the investigation. Nancy learned about it. The police chief actually suspected me. Suddenly, he was furious. The rich lady's temper also exploded. She was too lazy to explain to her male colleagues. Instead, he decisively knocked the opponent to the ground, then looked for the address on the moving company's order, arrived at the new address of Buffau. Coincidentally, Nancy hadn't had time to enter Buff's residence. Right in the corridor, she ran into the drug dealer who had intended to kidnap her and his girlfriend, the blonde. After seeing Nancy, he quickly pulled out his pistol and started a gunfight. Nancy's shooting skills are better in the chaos, shot the white-haired guy and the blonde girl. The white-haired man knew he was doomed. I don't want to go back to jail again. He had no choice but to commit suicide by shooting himself. And before committing suicide, shoot your blonde girlfriend first. Nancy escaped. After searching for Bafu's new address, I returned to the police station and explained the situation to my supervisor. A few days later, one afternoon, old Bu sat alone in a cafe, drinking coffee while reading the newspaper. An important piece of news appeared in the newspaper. Police at Bafu's new address. Fingerprints were found when the killer committed a crime, lots of photos taken on site. Besides, police are still investigating Nancy's husband in a pool of urine at the murder scene. Bafo's DNA was extracted. So the police finally concluded, Bafo is the fingerprint killer that the police have been tracking for many years. Female police officer Nancy was thus cleared of the suspicion of murdering her husband. He received a special commendation from the police department. After reading this news, old Bu smiled knowingly. Everything was within his calculations. He admired Nancy very much. This helped her get rid of her husband who kept pestering her. Nancy is in the apartment she rents in Balfour, found a moving company. The order was naturally left intentionally by Lao Bu. The purpose of Lao Bu doing this, one is in the so-called new residence of Bafo. A lot of evidence was left behind. Put the blame of the serial murders on Bafo. Nancy guide to near the residential building where the fugitive drug dealer by Mauhan was hiding. If the white man kills Nancy, it also helped old Bull get rid of a tough opponent. If the white-haired man died in Nancy's hands, it's no loss to him, old Bu. Although the old Bu's plan was implemented very smoothly, but there was always one question lingering in his mind. I want to ask Nancy in person. That's why Nancy didn't rely on her parents' resources. Become a well-fed, rich, and beautiful woman, or a strong woman who inherited the family business. Instead, I want to be a detective, which is both dangerous and hard. To clear up the doubts and happiness. Old Bu took it from a customer in the cafe, stolen a cell phone. Then he became the fingerprint killer called Nancy. Nancy thought the caller was Buffett. In order to buy time to locate the opponent's position, I had no choice but to tell the truth over the phone. According to her, her father favors boys over girls. He has been extremely indifferent to her since childhood. So when she grew up, I vowed to rely on my own efforts, create a business of your own. After Lao Bu solved the doubts in his heart, he threw away his phone contentedly. When the police tracked down the location, he had already left. That evening, when Lao Bu was preparing to go to sleep, go to the next bedroom as usual. I want to say goodnight to my daughter Jane. It turned out that my daughter was already fast asleep. Then he carefully stepped forward and took the quilt for his daughter. Who knows, Lao Bu's action accidentally woke up Jane Ning. It was like a conditioned reflex. He took out a pair of scissors from under the pillow. It stabbed hard into old Bu's neck. Blood immediately gushed out. I saw my father lying in a pool of blood. Jen Ning stood up calmly. Pick up the black-framed glasses that Lao Bu had just dropped on the bed. Wear it yourself. Old Bu is on his deathbed. From my daughter, I saw the shadow of my evil personality Marshall. In extreme fear, he suddenly woke up from his sleep. It turned out that it was just a nightmare. But old Bu is worried that the nightmare will eventually become a reality. Certainly, he didn't care that his daughter might kill him one day. I'm worried that my daughter will become the next me. This issue's story from the 2007 Hollywood crime thriller, Mr. Brooks. Although the film is relatively unpopular, the reputation is not top-notch either, but the protagonist of the film, Old Bull, that is Mr. Brooks. It is a Hollywood movie in the new century. A villain that can be ranked high. Its elegant temperament and a cold and decisive style of action and means of committing the crime, almost as good as Hannibal Lecter in The Silence of the Lambs. I don't know what you guys think of this role. Did it leave a deep impression? Okay, let's stop here for today. I like suspense. Friends who like crime and thriller movies and TV series. Welcome to like and follow. See you next time.